Welcome to another tax resolution training video from taxmarketinghq.com.
So let's start with an overview, IRM 5.1.7.1. This IRM provides instruction and guidance for working cases involving government entities, federal employees and retirees, IRS employees, military personnel, and civilian employees of the Department of Defense residing overseas. Additionally, it provides guidance for accounts of taxpayers who serve in a combat zone, contacting the U.S. Secret Service and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, and obtaining and maintaining compelled information. The procedures are written specifically for revenue officers. Other employees in SBSE and employees in other functions may refer to these procedures. So across this entire section of the IRM, it covers city and state government entities. It covers federal employees and retirees, IRS personnel, etc. However, in this episode of Inside the IRM, we're going to be focusing entirely on the military personnel aspects. So let's start with one of the most important things that you need to look for on a transcript when you're doing a transcript analysis of an active duty military person or a Department of Defense contractor overseas, or certain State Department personnel and State Department contractors. And this is called the C freeze, also aka the combat zone freeze. What you're going to look for in a transcript in the far left-hand column is a transaction code of 500, TC 500. What we want to see for service members that are located in a combat zone or in another area that we'll define here in a little bit is a code 1, meaning that they're still serving in an active combat zone. What this does is it locks the computer systems, the IRS, from entering new assessments or putting them into any kind of enforced collection activity. If this changes to a code 2 for a variety of circumstances that we'll get into, this indicates that the taxpayer is no longer in a combat zone and collection action can proceed. Individual taxpayers who have been identified as combat zone personnel receive certain perks under Internal Revenue Code section 7508 that basically postpones a lot of the normal deadlines that they would ordinarily be subject to. This includes the filing of a tax return, the actual paying of their taxes, the time limit on filing a claim for refund, or other actions that typically involve representation in front of the IRS. The theory behind section 7508 is that our troops have basically bigger things to worry about than what the IRS is doing back home while they are serving in a combat zone. This exemption from enforcement lasts for the entire period of service in that combat zone, and if they are injured in the line of duty, that exemption extends into any period of hospitalization that resulted from that injury, plus up to 180 days following such service. The IRS has to cease all enforcement action during this time period. So, who is eligible for this? Well, if an individual is serving in the U.S. Armed Forces or in support of the Armed Forces in a designated combat zone as declared by presidential executive order, they're good to go. If they are serving in the military or in support of the military when deployed outside the U.S. away from the individual's permanent duty station while participating in an operation designated as a contingency operation by the Secretary of Defense. If they're serving in the armed forces in an area designated by Congress as a qualified hazardous duty area. So we have presidentially declared areas, we have contingency operation areas declared by the SecDef, and Congress can declare qualified hazardous duty areas. So we have three different types of declarations that can be used to secure these IRC 7508 extensions on enforcement activity. Also, the spouses of combat zone personnel in any of those three types of areas also qualify. If the service member is injured and returned for hospitalization stateside, then the protections end for the spouse here at home. Individuals who serve in support of the armed services, well, who is that? Luckily, we have a list that Congress gave us. So this includes merchant mariners serving aboard vessels under the operation and control of the DoD. It includes Red Cross personnel. This includes accredited correspondents, media personnel that are reporting from the combat zone. And it also includes civilian personnel acting under the direction of the armed forces in support of those forces. So example, Blackwater security operatives and other armed DoD and State Department contractors at locations like embassies and diplomatic areas that may be within certain designated combat zones or qualified hazardous duty areas. Military service that is performed outside of a combat zone, but within those congressionally declared qualified hazardous duty area is treated in the same manner. Again, as long as the contractor or State Department employee, et cetera, is working in support of military operations and the service qualifies the individual for special military pay for duty subject to hostile fire. There is another section of the IRM, 5.19.10.6.2, combat zone qualified individuals and areas, that actually lists the current operational theaters where this exclusion applies. And we're going to talk about that here in a moment.
For more resources to grow your tax firm, be sure to visit taxmarketinghq.com.